Hello folks, we're back after a month off of no video uploads. Sorry, I needed to take a break, so we just took a little break, but we're back this week. And this week we're going to be doing kind of a different video. We're not talking about 5 really cool animals, or we're not talking about like care or anything like that. And today's video is completely unscripted. I don't have any bullet points or anything I need to make sure I talk about, or any facts. This is just me talking to the camera about something that kind of happened recently, and we're going to be talking about something that just about anyone that works with animals, exotic, domestic, whatever, we all deal with this. So since you're watching the video and you clicked on the video title, you already know that this video is about we recently lost both of our hedgehogs. Mary and Paris both passed away. Mary was last week and Paris was back at the beginning of May, so in the last month and a half or so. I mean, I have other mammals. I have 2 chinchillas and 2 bunnies, but those were my only hedgehogs. And then last year we actually lost my very first hedgehog, Pippin. So today I just want to talk about kind of the hedgehogs, and I'm going to kind of talk about what, at least is in my opinion, I think most people that work with animals would agree is kind of the hardest part about dealing with animals and kind of owning and working with animals. So I got Merry and Pippin, which they're named after 2 of the hobbits from the Lord of the Rings because I'm an adult, but I got those 2 3 years ago now. And when I got them, Pippin was just about 2, and Mary was only like 6 to 8 months, I think. And I got Paris last year. So I want to talk about in this video, before we get to the main part of the video, I want to talk about each of my hedgehogs and how they died, because I think that's important. Because this is something that, and again, this is the main point of the video, it's just the hardest part of dealing with animals isn't like the feeding or even the vet trips. Like if you get an animal like a dog that has a lot of allergies or something like that, you're going to the vet, that's a lot of money. It's not if you need surgery, it's not, even if you get like a not so friendly animal like Simon, my ornate monitor, when you get like an animal that really does not want to be around you and they get big and can do a lot of damage, even dealing with that is not the hardest part. The hardest part is losing an animal. But not only just losing an animal when it dies, it's when you have to be the one to make the call. I know normally you don't want to talk about this kind of stuff. I want to educate people about animals, but I think a big part of educating about captive care of exotic and, again, even domestic animals is talking about what you have to do, what you have to prepare yourself for when that animal gets older and these animals can't talk for themselves. So not only do you need to speak for these animals and saving their environment and saving them and keeping them from extinction, but when you have one in this situation, you have to be the one to speak for them as well. And again, I apologize if this video is kind of meandering. Again, I don't have bullet points like I usually do in my videos where I'm like, okay, I need to talk about these facts. This is just me kind of talking. So Pippin was 2 when I got him, and Pippin was kind of a slow decline in health. So all 3 of my hedgehogs, they all weighed in like the 320 to 360 gram range, somewhere in there for the 3 of them. Now Pippin, by the time he died last year, he was almost 5 years old. And if you remember back in the very first YouTube video, which featured hedgehogs, which was Paris, we talked about how hedgehogs are very prone to cancer. They're very prone to sickness and tumors and things. Probably about 5 months before he did die, he just kind of had a slow decline, and he just started kind of slowly losing weight. He wasn't acting as much himself kind of as time went on. I still used him in programs. It wasn't like he wasn't acting unhealthy. It's just I could tell he was an older hedgehog, so he wasn't going to programs as much. Mary went to more programs. Now Mary's kind of a different, Mary's a little grouchy. He was kind of more grumpy when you woke him up and things like that, whereas Pippin was a sweetheart from day one. So Pippin still went to programs, and then probably about 3.5 months before he did die, I just kind of stopped bringing him to programs in total because his poop kind of started looking weird and everything. And at this point, he was around 300 grams in weight, I believe. So he'd lost about 50 grams in weight. So I took him to the vet and we put him on meds and everything, but he still just kind of slowly started declining. And I mean, he was a 4.5-year-old hedgehog. So I mean, that is very long lived for a hedgehog. So Pippin, I kind of knew. Now he was my first hedgehog dealing with this. And remember, Mary was like a 1.5 years younger than him, so Mary was still running around like crazy doing all this stuff. So as Pippin kind of slowly kept declining, eventually Pippin hit like 250 grams and he was just not moving around as much. I noticed he was not really running on his wheel at night. He was still kind of eating, so I took him into the vet and everything. I mean, we did a bunch of meds and everything, but it was just kind of time to say goodbye to Pippin. So I made the call for the vet with the euthanasia, and it's a painless thing. They basically, it's like an injection, and it's painless. He just kind of drifts off in his sleep, from what I'm understand. So I held him as this happened, and it was very emotional because he was kind of my first hedgehog. And honestly, of the three, he was the one I had the most connection to because he was my first hedgehog, and he was just so friendly and everything. So that was how Pippin died. He was just a very slow decline, and then eventually it's just kind of like, okay, this enough is enough. And then a couple months after that, I got Paris. And again, all three of these hedgehogs, they were given to me. I didn't pay money for the hedgehogs. He just wanted to see Paris go to a good home, which is why I got Pippin and why I got Mary. Now, Paris was only about a year when I got her. Paris was not very, very old. And like I said, Paris passed away at the beginning of May. So I only had Paris for about 9 months. So Paris wasn't even Paris was like maybe 2 years old, just under, by the time that she did die. Now, Paris was a completely different story. Now, with Pippin, we did a necropsy on Pippin. The vet said his intestines looked really weird, so it was some kind of cancer or something leaching on that. Now, with Paris, like I said, I had for 8 months, and Paris was an absolute sweetheart, probably even friendlier than Pippin. I didn't really let too many people hold Pippin, let alone Mary, just because like they would ball up and hurt. Pippin or Paris never. I'm gonna keep doing that. I'm gonna keep confusing Pippin and Paris, but Paris never did that. Paris would walk around on kids. She loved it. She would walk around in the grass. She wasn't really scared of anything. And Paris was a young hedgehog, so I was expecting to have her for another couple years. Now, one night I go and I check on her, and she's passed away right next to her wheel. She's just lying there dead, and there was no indicator. She was just under 2. There was no visual signs. There was nothing. She was eating. She was running on her wheel. She was doing everything like normal. I was very confused and concerned. I was like, okay, maybe she caught something that like is a zoonotic disease. Maybe it can spread to people. Maybe it could spread to my other hedgehog, because I have the 2 hedgehogs stacked in cages on a shelf. So I was like, maybe Mary could catch something. So I took that into the vet the next day for a necropsy. And warning, this is not going to be a pleasant thing to talk about, but it is something I think needs to be said. So the necropsy showed something was weird with her kidneys. The vet said her kidneys basically looked shot. They were weird shaped, weird colors. It just looked cancerous. So, and if you remember again from our very first YouTube video, they're just magnets for cancer. So she had this weird kind of kidney stuff, and the vet said they must have ruptured, and it must have happened very quickly. He said probably within a half hour of her rupturing, they were probably shot. There's nothing that I could have done. There's nothing really anyone could have done, because there was almost no outward symptoms. So the kidneys ruptured and she was just gone. So whereas Pippin was a very slow, steady decline, she was the opposite. She was just very, very sudden, very unexpected. Now that was back at the beginning of May. Now fast forward to Mary, who was last week. Now, like I said, the hedgehogs I'm weighing usually every other week, every week. And honestly, I have so many animals. I don't take the animals out very often. The snakes I actually like never touch. I never really take out in my house, which kind of surprises a lot of people. But I mean, I have 30 snakes. So if I'm going to like sit around and try and handle all these snakes, and then the lizards, and then the mammals and the bird, and I won't have time. So I let the volunteers that come over kind of handle some of the animals that, like a lot of my friendly animals like the corn snakes, ball pythons, they don't need the work. The animals I dedicate the most time to are animals that need the socialization, like my monitor lizards, the iguanas, the tegus. Because of the whole corona thing, I haven't had volunteers over in quite a long time. So normally when the hedgehogs are getting taken out and handled, because the volunteers loved the hedgehogs, or me taking them to programs, since I wasn't doing nearly as many programs, the hedgehogs weren't touched as much. So they kind of were just, I guess you could say in a way, enjoying a vacation from having to go and see like hundreds of screaming kids and birthday parties and programs and assemblies and things. So I kind of was just letting them enjoy their vacation. I took the hedgehogs out once a week when I would like full clean their cage, when I would give them their bath, when I would weigh them, just kind of make sure. So when I weighed Mary last Monday night, something immediately I could tell was weird, because he had kind of slowly started going down in weight. And I was just like, okay, he's a 4+ year hedgehog. He is getting to that point where he's going to start slowing down. And obviously we're not doing, like I said, we're not going to programs right now. So he wasn't as big of a concern as like with Pippin, who I was still taking to a couple of programs. Mary hasn't gone to a program in a very long time. I would still use them in some things, like literally a few weeks before this, if you go back to the last video before this one, was we just did the live hangout YouTube feeding. We fed some of the animals live on YouTube, and he was one of the animals I used for that. So really no weirdness then, and that was only 2 weeks before this. And then, like I said, the week before this, when I took him out to weigh, he weighed a little less. He was normally around like 350, and I think this time he was like 337, 339, which again, it's not super uncommon. And then I took him out this time, and he dropped to 298. So in a week, he had dropped quite a few grams. And so I'm looking at him, and I noticed the one side of his jaw is really like swollen and puffed out. So I noticed right away, I'm like, okay, this is probably a tumor. And honestly, I knew from the second I saw that tumor, this is probably it. Because when you have a 4+ year old hedgehog and there's like a giant growth in their mouth, it usually comes from either a broken tooth gets infected and swollen, or it's a tumor. When you have a hedgehog that's old, it's probably, even if you do surgery, there's not much that can be done, especially because they're so small and everything. So Tuesday morning, I called emergency to bring it into the vet. We do x-rays and stuff like that. And he says it's a tumor. And I knew this was going to happen because I look at, you do research and you find other people on forums and Reddit and things like that, Facebook pages, where their hedgehog has a tumor and there's really nothing that can be done. So he said the tumor had basically broken and started like deteriorating the jaw, because it was growing, and this has happened in a week, so it was probably very cancerous with how big it was growing, and there was really nothing that he could do, because oral tumors are really, really common in old hedgehogs, and especially cancers. So he would have to do that, realign the jaw and stuff, and the cancer would not be all taken out. It would just come back, and with how aggressive it grew just in a week or so, it was just going to come back even worse probably. And he was not eating as much, and he was running around just fine. He was still on his wheel, he was still pooping and stuff, but he was losing weight, and that was because he couldn't really eat, because he had to be careful with this giant tumor that was causing him pain. The whole side of his face, it looked like he just got stung by a bee or something like that. And when I watched him that night try and eat, and he was trying to get in on this side, and he would just spit the food out because it was painful, I'm sure. So we made the call to put him out of his kind of pain, and we euthanized him. So that was the last hedgehog I had. So now I don't have any hedgehogs. And this brings us to the point of this video. The hardest thing, I think, when you're working with animals, and it necessarily isn't when they die. It's when you have to be the one to make the call. When you have an animal that either outwardly looks fine or mostly fine, to say this is enough is enough. This animal, it needs to not be in pain. It needs to not be in the situation it's in anymore. To me, the hardest part is when you make the call. Because like with Paris, it was just gone. There was nothing I did. I was very upset and very alarmed and concerned, but there was nothing that could be done. So to me, I think the hardest part is when you as a person, when you are the owner or caretaker of this animal, you have to make the call. Because in the wild, these animals wouldn't go out like this. These animals that develop arthritis when they get older, when they can't fend for themselves, when they get a tumor making it so they can't eat or can't walk or whatever, if they get a broken foot, these animals would just die, get eaten, because that's just how nature works. Predators go for the sick ones, they go for the injured ones, the ones that aren't the healthiest ones. That is natural selection. So these animals, hedgehogs that are developing tumors or whatever in the wild, they just wouldn't survive. So the ones that would be strong, have a very good immune system, that wouldn't get cancer or anything until they're very, very old, the ones that live the natural life cycle they're supposed to, these ones would reproduce and those genes would continue on. Whereas the ones that get sick, nature doesn't want those ones to reproduce. Nature doesn't want that to spread. So then you have predators that'll come in and take those ones away so they aren't in the gene pool anymore. So in captivity, you don't get that. In captivity, when you have a tiger or an otter or a bird or a dog or a cat or something like that, when you have these animals, you have to make that call. You have to look at this animal and be like, okay, this animal is in too much pain. The tiger can't really walk anymore. Its joints hurt too much. If you have a hedgehog where the tumor is making it so it can't eat. If you have a bird with fatty liver disease because people just feed them seed diets and think that's okay. If you have a bird that's just got such an unhealthy interior that its organs are shot, its kidneys are shot, you have to make the call. It gets to a point where medicine can only do so much. Pain management can only take you so far. So I don't care if you are a zookeeper or like a collection manager at a zoo or something like that. If you just have a dog or a cat and that's just your only pet, or if you're someone like me that has 70 exotic animals and you do outreach education programs with them, if you have an animal of some degree, whether it's domestic, whether it's a horse, a cow, a pig, a dog, a cat, a tiger, a giraffe, an elephant, whatever. If you have an animal, and this mostly applies to mammals, because reptiles, you don't see this as much, but if you have an animal that is outwardly showing you signs of its age, showing you signs that it can't go on anymore, and you have to be the one to make that call, that's really tough. That's really hard. With like my hedgehogs, it's kind of different because they only live 3 to 4, maybe 5 years if you're lucky. I went into Hedgehogs knowing, okay, this is just what you're signing up for. This is what's going to happen. Eventually, there's a 95% chance this hedgehog's going to get some type of tumor, some type of cancer, and I'm going to have to be the one to make this call. As soon as, like with Mary, as soon as I saw that tumor, I knew. As soon as I saw that bloated lip, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew the next day was probably, I knew that was probably going to be his last night. I knew the next day we were probably going to have to put him to sleep. So you do that. You see an animal and you have to make the call. And a lot of times it is really hard because these animals can't tell you. They can't say, hey, I'm in a lot of pain. Hey, this isn't good, blah, 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 blah. They can't tell you that. They could be still wanting to play. They could still be running on their wheel. They could still be pooping on their wheel and running in the poop and eating and doing all the normal stuff. But the animal is suffering. You see this a lot with zoos. You have big cats. And I've said tiger a few times, big cats are a huge example of this, where you can look at them and you can kind of tell they're old, they're in pain, they're not jumping up onto basking platforms and perches and things as much, they're not maybe playing as much. You have to, as a keeper, you have to be the one to notice these things. You have to be the one to look at these things and see it, and you have to make the hard choice. And she's getting worse, the pain meds aren't helping as much anymore, she's not eating, blah, 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 blah. You have to be the one to start that conversation. You have to be the one to say, my animal, this animal, my dog, my cat, my lion, my elephant, whatever. You have to be the one to make that call. You have to be the one to kind of step in nature's place and say, this animal shouldn't be doing this anymore. This animal can't be in this situation anymore. And that, I think, is the hardest part with animal keeping, to me, hands down, because you obviously feel sad that the animal is gone. You feel sometimes maybe angry because of the situation, but I think, and this happens with some of my animals, you feel guilty. You feel guilty because you're like, this animal, I don't know, you doubt yourself. You're like, maybe I should have done this. Maybe I should have done this. Maybe I should have kept trying with this medicine. Maybe I should have just kept going. You feel guilty because you're the one that did it. Regardless of how necessary it was, regardless of how there was no other choice. It was either let the animal continue to suffer, let the animal continue on in its current state, and that would most likely degrade. Because when you're making this call, old age isn't stopping. Old age is not going to fix itself. Cancer, most of the time with animals, especially like hedgehogs and stuff, it's not going to get better. So you have to make this call, and you're the one doing it. And even if it's super necessary and the only other option was going to be that the animal would keep suffering, you beat yourself up, because there's nothing that can be done. Animal is gone, and it was your animal, or it was the animal that you cared for, or you raised, or you've been a keeper for a decade or 2 decades, your whole career. It's a very personal animal to you. It's part of your family. You have to be the one to make the call. The most you can say, the most you can do to help is just keep telling yourself there was nothing else you could have done. You did everything you could, and that was it. And you tried meds. Like Pippin was on so many meds. I was trying for months, different meds and everything like that, different foods, trying to get him maybe eat more and stuff. But you just hit a point where there is nothing else that can be done. That's why it hurts. You live with it. You have to live with it. But the best thing you can do is just tell yourself that is what you had to do. That is your only option. And again, to me, that is the hardest part. I think that's all we can do. I think that's all anyone can do when you're dealing with this. Sometimes it's very sudden, sometimes it's drawn out. The vet can't tell you that it's time. You have to be the one to tell the vet that it's time. So hopefully this video helps some of you. Hopefully, if any of you are going through this right now, like I am and my family is and other people are, this video might be able to help you. Just tell yourself that I did what was best for the animal. I did the best I could for that animal, and ultimately that was the best option for the animal. So yeah, on that cheery note, yeah, I know, weird comeback after a really long, the first break we've actually had in uploading videos. It took a month off, and come back with this super happy video. But it was something that's been on my mind and formulating for the last few weeks. So I was like, okay, I think this is a very important video. Hopefully you folks watched it to the end. I mean, if you found the video helpful or anything, if you want to like it, I'd be very grateful. If you want to share this video with someone that is going through this and maybe just listening to my stories with my hedgehog and some of the other animals and stuff, maybe that'll help. I don't know. If this video can help someone going through this and just kind of maybe bring outside perspective, that would be very awesome. And thank you anyone that watched to the end of this and watched through even half of this or whatever. Thank you guys for being here. I had a couple of people reach out wondering when the next video was coming. So thank you anyone that supports the channel and likes what we do. And whew, I think I'm losing my voice because I haven't talked this much in a long time because it's been a while since I did a video. But thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll catch you later.